just another story of the same. You know, we're having a good time. But just be respectful, dudes, and never learn until it's too late. Have a good time.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Baltimore Bureau podcast. I'm Dharna, and I'm here with Easy and Baynard.
Good morning.
I don't know why I sound so somber.
I see breaking news. Sorry, I was distracted as we started. I'm seeing breaking news on my phone. This is just that the two members of the gun trace task force are appealed, wanting a new trial, but I knew that was coming. So that's actually not breaking, but sorry about that. We're always working around here on multiple things.
Yeah, good advertising for us.
That is good. Breaking news. Police officers.
Yeah.
Fighting for their justice.
Yeah.
And I mean, why they wanted a new trial is one of the witnesses was recently indicted last week, the people who was the witness, and it would be a really serious problem if the prosecutors knew that that guy was under investigation. Not that it would have mattered, except that if they didn't disclose it to the defense, then it's a Brady violation. You really do have to tell them the stuff that you know, and but unlikely it's unlikely that they knew it because, and they say they didn't know it because the investigations would be separate investigations. So
y'all should read the stories from last week about that trial that Baynard and Brandon Soderberg and Lisa McRae did.
Yes.
Is that right? That's correct, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, and about the what trial? I'm sorry.
What wasn't the Aller stuff last week?
Sentencing. Yes, yeah. And that was just me and Brandon on that.
I was just kidding.
Yeah, sorry. But yeah, Lisa wrote about D'Souza last week.
That's right.
And so there's the commissioner went through a saga last week of first being federally charged by the same prosecutors. We made a mistake.
As we fucked up last week on the podcast.
Yes, correction. He was not indicted because the charges came from criminal information rather than from a grand jury. So it's a technicality. But the grand jury now has subpoenaed his records going all the way back to 2008, all of his financial records, and he resigned. And so we don't know what's going on with the police department here. At all. The mayor, meanwhile, wants special exemption from ethical rules so that she can raise money personally because she's so good at making sure that people have no financial conflicts and problems, obviously.
Clearly.
And yet the national media is not covering this shit at all, right? We have this fucking insane New York Times story. What was it called? You had it up a second ago.
A Baltimore neighborhood is revitalized with help from its residents. And there's a beautiful picture of Mount Vernon, the Washington Monument, and a kid skateboarding, which in real life you rarely see.
Yeah. And when you do, they get apprehended immediately. So.
Right. So it's. I first saw the article when you tweeted out to New York Times about how irresponsible of an article it is. I think that it's a good article for people who are rich and disconnected from Baltimore, who want to look for a nice little fancy neighborhood to move into that's up and coming and some parts historic, some parts new wave. But totally disconnected from the real Baltimore experience. It starts off talking about how Baltimore was a haven. This area was a haven for prostitutes and crack dens, but its residents intent on fending off the drug scourge and homicide rate, and then goes through all of these ills of the neighborhood. And then it's the first thing they did was revitalize the Washington Monument and the parks around it. And it's just
now we've come out on the other side with a hotel, a boutique hotel owned by the granddaughter of Sam Walton, the founder of Walmart.
And to talk about Mount Vernon as revitalized now is just insane because it's not like it's been struggling.
Yeah,
or
it's not like it
anything.
had anything to be revitalized out of.
It's so tone deaf and weird. And 3 years after Freddie Gray, and everyone's like, oh, we're going to revitalize Sandtown, Pennsylvania Avenue. And then the Times, Mount Vernon, in 2015, I was living in Mount Vernon, and Mount Vernon was great.
Yeah.
And there was no, the problems were, and now, since then, what you've had for revitalization is we have a fucking CVS instead of the Hippo.
Yep.
We're about to get the Eddies and all that stuff destroyed. They have pushed all of the sex workers away from over at like Reed Street and stuff, are trying to up to like 23rd. And so, I mean, it's just like, fuck those people. That's all. That's
really fuck those people.
Yeah, I follow one of the groups on there, and the other day there was a conversation about why we don't have a bagel shop in Mount Vernon.
Oh, we're really slumming it without a bagel shop.
Now, I mean, like, some of them were really perplexed, like, oh, wow, that's a good point. Like, you know, such and such place sells bagels.
You're talking about the Mount Vernon Safety Group on Facebook or something?
It's one of the Mount Vernon neighborhood groups, but they were like, they were really having this in-depth discussion about, like, why they don't have a place specifically for fucking bagels. And so I think this article is just interesting that it's written by the New York Times, which, of course, is not here in Baltimore. And it's like, I feel like in some way trying to attract more, like, New York money down to the neighborhood.
It really does feel like a pitch to try to bring, like, these Amazon pitches and stuff that all the cities 100%. Are begging. And so I know that where Mount Vernon, I mean, where the Eddies in Mount Vernon is going to become another corporate corner. Mount Vernon has the one corporate corner already. I tried really hard to brand it as that, since they like branding so much, where the fucking Potbellies and the Chipotle and the Starbucks and that like little awful stretch. The other side's great right there with Aloha.
Yeah, with Aloha and like the Mount Vernon or the University Market or whatever. Yeah.
So anyway, that's a frustrating.
Yeah.
Sort of.
I'm just noticing my man Andrew Mangum took the photos. He's a Baltimore photographer. I'm gonna reach out to him and see what's up with that.
Maybe they should have hired a Baltimore journalist.
Yeah, I know, right? Because Miranda is definitely not that.
Yeah, she worked for the Post for a while doing real estate, and I mean, real estate people should really not be allowed to write. It's the only thing that I agree with Trump on, maybe, is that they should have their credentials revoked if you fucking write that kind of garbage, and you should go work for Trump Industries or whatever. One great piece, though, that before we get into some of our stories that we produced, that I was really happy to see is Rebecca Kirkman, who was one of the people who went down with the ship at the City paper. A great writer, was responsible for everything in that paper being factually accurate for a long time, was in charge of the fact-checking program. She had a great piece on the poet Joseph Massey, Joseph Massey, in the Outline, which is a really nice news site, a really well-designed site. And so about this poet and his sexual assault allegations against him, and but it's a beautifully written story and also beautifully laid out on the site. You know what else is a beautifully laid out site? Our new site.
The new Real News Network site. TheRealNews.com.
Yeah, shout out to Rebecca, but also our stuff is good.
And so if you're frustrated a little bit because you're looking for one of our old stories and you can't find it right now, some links got broken, some things like that happened, because that's just what happens when you get a new fucking website. And so be patient with us. We're fixing it. It's going to be okay. You don't need, even if you're internal to our building here or external, you don't need to yell at Stephen Frank. You don't need to yell at anyone else. You can be chill about it, because this is part of the growing process, and we'll be okay.
Yeah, that's what happens when you smash the old system.
What kind of nice stuff do we have on the site this week, Dharna?
Well, the first thing we're going to watch today and listen to today is from Easy, and it's about the fourth ceasefire weekend, the fourth quarterly ceasefire weekend.
Yeah, this is the fourth weekend that Baltimore has called a ceasefire to stop the killings. For people listening who don't know, once per quarter now there is a Baltimore ceasefire to ask people to stop the violence, stop the killings. And every time I try to cover a different aspect of the ceasefire now has grown to, I think this weekend there were over 48 different events happening throughout the city, and just a wide range of events, resources being provided, fun family stuff, to prayer vigils and cookouts and all kinds of stuff. So me and Will went and covered a pancake breakfast for fathers of victims of gun violence. Well, not just victims of gun violence, victims who've been murdered violently. A pancake breakfast held by Black Daddy Gang, who I've been affiliated with over the years, Band of Brothers, and Black Fathers. All came together to host this pancake breakfast, and it's really nice event. Like, I really, felt a sense of camaraderie there, just among fathers, even some who, might not have lost their children, but were there, in support. We talked to Erica Bridgeford, who is considered the mother of ceasefire. We talked to her brother and father this time, who I think, the ceasefire has gotten a lot of coverage, but we have not talked to these two. Like, I haven't seen any of the other coverage of this particular weekend, but in the past we haven't heard from the brother and the father. And Erica had a brother who was killed, and it's part of her inspiration for doing this. So we get to talk to the two of them, and I'm proud of the piece. I hope folks like it. But this one is called "The Brothers Bond." The Baltimore ceasefire is happening again this weekend. Amid a recent rise in murders, the quarterly weekend call to stop murder is seeing its fourth weekend since August of 2017. Every ceasefire weekend in Baltimore brings a growing list of events that promote nonviolence. The last ceasefire weekend in February of 2018 not only saw 0 murders, but in the following days, Baltimore went a total of 12 days without murder. On this weekend, Mother's Day weekend, a Saturday event is a pancake breakfast to honor a group that we rarely hear from as it relates to murders, the fathers. What happens to the men who lose their children to violence? Is there a place for them to go and talk about their grief, to fellowship with those who are members of a club no parent ever wants to join?
We're big supporters of the Baltimore ceasefire. That hits on one of our issues that we're really passionate about, violence prevention. So we're just out here to host a life-affirming event for the community, to bring the community together and not forget the ones who have lost loved ones to violence in the streets of Baltimore, to let them know they're not alone and they have members in the community that support them.
And it's letting the community know that there's people out here that cares. There was a big feeling of hopelessness, people getting killed and shot, and some people felt like they were suffering alone and that they had nobody to feel their pain or understand their pain. So when they see organizations like this that actually come together, that say, my organization is this, his organization is this, but together as a community, we want to stop the violence and come together and make sure that there's peace, then it's a big deal.
The breakfast was organized by 3 groups: Black Fathers, Band of Brothers, and Black Daddy Gang. 3 groups in Baltimore that promote fatherhood. All year long, they promote fathers building healthy relationships with their children. They work to dispel the stigma of absentee black fathers. This is the first breakfast, and it appears to be much needed.
B, being accountable. R, reverses stereotypes. O, owning our destiny. V, vigilant in our fight. A, accepting our leadership roles. And Z, zero tolerance for injustice.
Erica Bridgeford, who some call the mother of the ceasefire movement, has worked in conjunction with her brother, Nathan Pop Thomas of Band of Brothers.
I lost a brother, I believe back in 07. I don't really keep time with it because it's not good for me mentally. But yeah, I lost a brother. He lived a life of crime, as I did. He took another route than I did. I sold drugs. He decided to use them, and it kind of haunted him. He was murdered, shot about 6 to 8 times, left dead on the street. I actually had to go identify his body. So I had a choice to either avenge his death or avenge violence itself. And there was some brief moments where I wanted to avenge his death. And I acted foolishly, and I decided that that wasn't the best way to handle it. It was the best way was to go at violence itself.
Erica and Nathan lost a brother to violence, so their father, Michael, is especially glad to be present.
My son, Nathan Thomas, told me about this I'm going to say maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago. He said there was going to be an event honoring black fathers who've lost children to violence. And unfortunately, I'm one of those. I fit into that category. And so I thought that it was a major thing to me to be here, because I've never heard of anything like this. I've seen a lot of situations where they have events honoring moms who've lost children, and honoring even siblings of deceased family members. But I haven't seen anything done for dads. And so when I heard this was going to be done, I had to be here.
The Baltimore 365 will celebrate its 1-year anniversary during the next ceasefire in August of 2018. The original idea was to just have one weekend calling to stop the killings. But when the frustrations of citizens who have seen little results from a corrupt police force, little change from City Hall or Maryland's state capitol, and waves of hopelessness rang out louder and louder, ceasefire went 365. They're gaining more and more resources, with roughly 48 events happening throughout the city this weekend. For the Real News Network, with Will Arenas, I'm Easy Jackson.
Yeah, I mean, that's some powerful stuff, and really unimaginable to but so many people in this city go through it. Over, I think, 109 as of right now murders so far this year. There were no murders during the ceasefire weekend, which is important to point out. Yeah. And but think of all of the people in all the circles for those 109 people already. Yeah. And I mean, some of it is violence that's happening in our streets, and some of it is then there's still police violence. And Taya Graham went this week. The Open Society Institute had the Mothers of the Movement come to Baltimore, and surprisingly, no other press was there.
Yeah, shocking.
But Tamir Rice's mother, Eric Garner's mother, and it's really moving story to see not only, like, in both of these cases, not only the pain, but the rising up from it, and the refusing to be broken by it, and the acting.
Totally. Like, to have something that's that unimaginably horrible spark, like, your need to make change, not just like your need to be like, everything is horrible, I'm shutting myself away forever, is like, yeah, kind of even more unimaginable.
Yeah, so let's go and watch this one.
Yeah. This is Taya Graham reporting for the Real News Network in Baltimore City, Maryland. The price of police brutality continues to take its toll, and no one knows this better than the mothers of the movement. They are connected by tragedy, the death of a child at the hands of police. Each one has had a child who died either while in police custody or as a result of police actions. The deaths of their children has inspired them to speak out on behalf of victims of police brutality and has fueled the Black Lives Matter movement. They have pushed past their own pain and adversity to make sure the devastation that has been wreaked upon their family is never visited upon another. Tonight, they are talking at an Open Society event at the University of Baltimore. We spoke to each one before the event to learn how they think they can change policing in America.
Well, I'm hoping sharing Tamir's story will open up the conversation of racism in America that needs to happen daily, by the minute, by the second. We're still seeing police kill Black people and brown people every day I wake up on the television. So I just want Tamir to be that conversation piece. He was the youngest child far as national attention goes, and everybody knows him, and I just want him to be that child, that person, that ball of light and joy, to have this conversation of racism and the bias policing in America.
Pandaleo, after he killed my son, supposed to be on administrative duty. He's gotten he got thousands and thousands of dollars in pay raises, maybe not pay raises, but overtime. Yes, and this happened, the first year it happened, and I found out about it. I had a press conference and took it to Mayor de Blasio. He said this would never happen again. Anybody on administrative duty would not get that type of money. The next year, it happened again with Pandaleo. So what does that say? What message does that send to other officers? It just tells them that they could get away with murder and get paid for it.
As a matter of fact, I'm working with an organization that's called Onus Inc. that has drafted up legislation, and it's called URLEIA, which is an acronym, URLEIA, which stands for Uniformed Reporting Law Enforcement Improvement Act. And what they have done after the killing of Michael Brown in St. Louis was they looked at every loophole where there was a gap in the process, and have created proposed legislation that will address all of these loopholes. They need to be drug tested. After every excessive force or deadly force, they need to be drug tested. Here in the state of Maryland, the Law Enforcement Officers' Bill of Rights allow them 10 days to even be questioned. That needs to be 0. We as citizens, when we kill, we have to report right away, right? So we need to get that done. We need independent prosecutors. We don't want someone that works for and the police, are in bed with, if you will, for the lack of the right term right now, but they're in bed together. You need someone that's independent, that has no skin in the game, if you will, to have that independent separately. We just want accountability.
The devil is a lie, because if I had power, killing cops would be in cell blocks, so let's be clear. So that really is tiresome. And then on another level, it really irritates me when they always try to make it seem like street violence is over here and police brutality victims are over here, when it's all together. They don't black crime. I don't even call it that. It's called community violence. Because Caucasians kill Caucasians. They don't call that Caucasian on Caucasian crime. Asian kill Asians. That's not Asian on Asian crime. Why is it black on black crime? It's just utterly ridiculous. So I want to talk about blue on black crime when these officers are killing us.
And don't let anyone say that your vote don't count. Because if it didn't count, why would it be so many millionaires trying to restrict our vote? You take somebody with you to the polls.
That's right.
Miss Annie can't get out. She's in the wheelchair. Get her. Take her to the polls. Sister Sue, she's out there. You take her to the polls. Take your van, take as many as you can take to the polls, because this is important.
I was a little bit in the conversation, working with some of the activists, trying to have Tim McGinty do the right thing. He found it like a joke. He said that my family was strange and that we were looking for an opportunity. This is the prosecutor that told me that he was going to do what he gonna do to convict the officers. So he just basically lied to my face. I didn't know. But I wasn't really part of that conversation. I was pretty much out of it, but I'm glad it's gone. I'm glad Tim McGinty is gone. Okay, that's his name. Timothy McGinty, he's gone.
My son was killed, and his death cannot be in vain. My son was murdered for no reason. And if we sit back and allow this to happen and do nothing, then that means we're in consent with the status quo. Under no circumstances was I going to allow my son's death to be in vain when he had every right to be where he was the night that he was murdered. He had done no wrong. He had was not involved in any violence, any drugs, any alcohol, any of that. And so I'm saying to myself, if my son, who is in a 2-parent household, who's a full-time college student, who's working a part-time job, who's a mentor to his peer group, if he can die, then none of us stand a chance here. Any of us are open to police terror.
My son was a very jolly person. Everyone loved him. He was the life of the party. My family, when we had family meetings, they would wait for him to come because they know that we were going to have a good time because he was just that type of person.
Gary was he was a wonderful kid, not only because he was my kid, but he was just a wonderful person. Gary enjoyed writing, loved writing, thus the journalism major, mass communications major, and a journalist. And Gary was an aspiring rapper. He was a jokester. He loved to play jokes on everybody. He was a mentor to his peer group, so he was always leading the pack, right? Such a great kid, and his peer group looked up to him. Thus, you know, that particular night, you know, he had to play the role of the mentor.
As far as sports he liked, it was like basketball, football, swimming. He was on the soccer team in the 3rd and 4th grade. So he was really an all-American kid that liked American things. Yeah.
And he was the baby of the family too?
Yes, he was the baby, and keep the family laughing, like the glue to keep us all together, like the piece that's missing from my puzzle right now. So yeah.
Man, yeah, before y'all started playing that, you were talking about like imagining that, you know, that kind of trauma, that kind of loss. And I think in both of these stories, it's interesting to see, you know, we all go through grief, you know, and we deal with like losing people. It's a part of life. But to see these circumstances where people, a death makes them decide to fight further, or, you know, and, you know, kind of change their course. You know, I think in the ceasefire story, Pop, Erica's brother, talks about how, you know, he wanted to get revenge for his brother. He could get revenge for his brother, or he could fight violence, you know, fight violence. And then you have these powerful mothers who, you know, choose to continue to push back against police terrorism. And I don't know, it's just a strong example of the willpower and abilities of human beings, I think.
Yeah, and I mean, I've been thinking a lot about, I have this big story coming out next week that about police mental health of police officers, and I was really thinking last night a lot about how so Allers, and one of the only person so far who's been sentenced in the GTTF case, got 15 years last week. And one of the crazy things that happened in court is his lawyer read from a suicide note that they found in his sock drawer. And they talked about the PTSD and the depression and the alcoholism that he was dealing with. And this guy who I've been interviewing for a long time texted and said, oh yeah, I guess I should have robbed people. Maybe that would have made me feel better. But thinking about that, how many people in the city are going through trauma and are dealing with mental illness in some way, and in some cases are armed and scared, and then they're being confronted on the street on the sort of edges of the consciousness of so many of us, and by people who are also dealing with trauma and who are carrying guns. And like, it's just like, that's what policing has become. And is this, I mean, that just can't be the way that this works. And
100%.
You know, it on the other side of it, it takes the people who are working class people who can't get any other work in this city. You either are on one side of the drug war or the other, and that sort of is the economy of the city.
Yeah.
But poor people are starting to fight back.
Yeah, exactly. And this and the drug war, and you know, yeah, exactly. But poor people are starting to fight
transitions. Back. Like if you can figure out the transitions in a piece, then fucking everything flows.
Yeah.
All right, we're here with Professor Baynard. Yeah. So the war on drugs, the war on like economic freedoms, or the war on, well, whatever. The war of the police, I guess, are all things that are taken up by the Poor People's Campaign, which is headed to Washington. And Eddie Conway went and spoke to some folks in Annapolis who are organizing the Poor People's Campaign, who are working with Dr. William Barber and Reverend Liz Theo Harris. This is all, inspired by MLK's Poor People's Campaign 50 years ago.
And if you're listening and it's prior to Monday, May 21st, they're having another direct action. 11 people were arrested on last Monday, and they're going to have another direct action at Lawyers Mall in Annapolis at the Capitol at 2 p.m. And this is going to be ongoing, and it's happening in numerous cities around the country. 35 different states are going to be having protests, plus Washington, D.C., and then there's going to be a big thing in Washington, D.C., so this is important.
And check out some more of our coverage over the next 6 weeks, I think it is.
Standing with 37 states, plus the District of Columbia, against poverty, systemic racism, ecological devastation,
spoke with several activists that have organized this rally.
I'm here because poverty is at a point of crisis, an epidemic crisis in the United States right now. Yet our politicians, our public figures aren't doing enough to address it. We have a culture in our society that blames us for being poor.
Well, I guess I've been an activist for a long time, but I've gotten good at playing the game of looking like I'm not in poverty, but I'm on the edge of poverty. This has become kind of a country of the haves and have-nots, right? And I guess I've become more keen at the game of knowing how to look like I'm middle class when maybe I'm struggling a little bit more than it looks.
At the age of 18, I became homeless and began a chronic period of homelessness in the Baltimore city system. For 4 years, I waited for housing and there was nothing. Finally, after 4 years with a new mayor and 4 years of struggling through homelessness, I got an emergency Section 8 voucher. Though it was much better, my living conditions were terrible. I had a bad landlord who refused to fix the leaking roof in my apartment, and because I was receiving housing assistance and they knew I had nowhere else to go, they were allowed to not fix my apartment. These are political issues and these are moral issues. America cannot deny that anymore.
Well, I've been involved in civil rights work since the 60s and was involved in the first Poor People's campaign. So we opened up our church so that the people on the mall who are getting rained out were able to have a place to sleep.
Okay.
So I've been involved in this for a long time, and it's about time that we revisit Martin Luther King's 3 general issues that he raised of racism, militarism, and poverty. And then we've added the degradation of the environment because that's key too.
I'm not aware. Is that place there closed now? The legislation session is over with?
Yes, absolutely. But we say every day that there is extreme poverty in our country and in the state of Maryland. Our politicians need to be working to eradicate it, to fix it. And so, people don't get a day off from being poor. And so our politicians shouldn't take a day off from working to fix these problems.
50% of the people in this country went on strike for a week. You see how the teacher strikes work?
Yeah.
I don't think we'll change their mind. I think we will make them do it if this campaign continues to grow the way it needs to.
This action is going to go on for the next 6 weeks, and on June the 23rd, there'll be a gathering in Washington, D.C. From all the different states and areas that's involved.
Martin Luther King said civil disobedience was the best way to make a social change, and I believe that.
Talking about this in coffee shops, barber shops, school, church, etc., right? We want people to be paying attention to this issue and saying, okay, what are we going to do to tangibly change this?
Thank you for joining me at this rally, and we'll continue to follow this activities, and thank you for joining The Real News. I'm Eddie Conway.
Man, that's working with Eddie Conway is pretty fucking cool.
Yeah,
I think that's something we could all agree on. That's he's really good at pulling me back when I get hot-headed and stuff. And that's what you need as an editor, as a manager and stuff, is someone who can kind of know when to push you forward and know when to pull you back. And
it's also a different thing when somebody who spent 44 years in prison tells you to calm down.
And
it's just like what am I really tripping about?
Totally. But then it doesn't demean what he's like, oh, you're having a hard day at work because you have to edit 3 pieces.
Yeah.
And I'm taking you seriously because you're feeling crazy about that, even though I spent 44. Yeah. Thanks, Eddie. You're the best.
This piece, though, man, 43 million people living in poverty, and one of the women on here talks about being homeless at 18 years old. It's just horrific, man. A country like this with all of these resources. We just talked earlier about Mount Vernon, and how that neighborhood pooled their money together to open up a wine store, and it's and meanwhile there's all of these people who are sleeping on the street. And constantly in search of food, and it's heartbreaking.
It really is, and I mean, so we have a lot of elections coming up in both nationally and locally, where we hope that people will start to challenge some of this push that's been on both sides of the aisle for the last 30 years to just, or more, to make rich people richer, poor people poorer. And I mean, the hashtag resistance is sure disappointing in this. So we now have a torturer for the CIA director. I mean, I don't know what we expect.
Oh, but a woman torturer.
It's the CIA.
So it's better.
Yeah. You know, thanks to Democratic votes for that. We have the Democrats like Bobby Zirkin in here who are pushing for more mass incarceration type stuff. I'm going to be asking questions in a forum for District 43 on June the 5th, focusing on public transportation and on criminal justice of the candidates there. And we're going to really be pushing on some election coverage over the next month leading up to the primary. We have a little bit more than a month leading up to the primary here in Maryland.
Yeah, and we're also going to be having a town hall focusing on education specifically, which is, you know, obviously something that's been coming up nationally because of all these teacher strikes and teachers fighting for better healthcare, better pay, better conditions for the kids that they're teaching. But locally here, there's been a lot of issues sort of coming to a head because the Kirwan Commission is, you know, going to be instated, and a lot of people are hoping that that can bring in some change to especially tackle like systemic racism in classrooms. So yeah, check out, you know, that'll be sometime in June. Come see our town hall on education.
Which I think June 12th, but maybe that's being...
yeah, tentatively June 12th.
Yes, maybe that's being shifted around a little bit. We'll keep covering state's attorney's race, several delegates races, Senate races. And there's also the anniversary this week. There are a lot of positive things coming up. And one of them is the anniversary of the Black Classic Press, which is the 40th anniversary.
Yeah, it's the 40th anniversary. Paul Coates, you heard last week on the podcast if you were listening to that. This is part 2 of his interview with Mark Steiner.
Before we go into that, though, he has a kid that some people might have heard of, Paul, that Mark doesn't mention in the thing. But Easy saw him last night, so...
yeah, Ta-Nehisi Coates was in town last night at the Baltimore Museum of Art. It was the second part of a 3-part series they have called Necessity of Tomorrows. And Ta-Nehisi Coates did a talk with the Baltimore Museum of Art director Christopher Bedford on Afrofutures. He read from his Black Panther series, and did some Q&A.
How was that reading from a comic book? Because normally when you see like a literary reading, it's more like and it's just long paragraphs, not like pow.
Yeah. It was cool, man, because I think the thing I like about Ta-Nehisi Coates is like he's an intellectual, but he's also like real. You know what I mean? Like he's like a real life person.
Like a cool guy.
Yeah. So like, there were funny parts. He was really good at, reading, the expressions and, emotions that come across in the reading, and wasn't just like standing in front of the crowd, reading this boring, these boring excerpts. People were really engaged. It's really easy to be engaged with him as he's talking, you know what I mean? Because it's just like, wow, like common sense answers and, things like that. So I thought it was cool. The BMA has a bunch of new African art up. So we got some footage of that. We got to interview a couple people that were there just about Afrofuturism. We didn't get a chance to talk to Ta-Nehisi. He had a no press rule yesterday. But we did talk to artist Stephen Towns, who had a magnificent piece that is based on the Nat Turner narrative, but kind of adding some Afrofuturism in it, in that like mystery and magic, but it's all quilts. Like all of his pieces are quilts. and they all tell different stories. So it was a dope event. Shout out to Baltimore Museum of Art for putting on a really, really nice thing.
And our old comrade Bashi Rose was talking about
Nat
Nat Turner.
Bashi Rose was there talking about Nat Turner. They played Sunrise movie, Space is a Place.
I love that movie. That's awesome.
Space is a place. Yeah, so it was cool, man. Shout out to Chaotic Couture. Who's a rapper from here. He was performing last night, and yeah, it was dope.
So you got a piece. You'll have a piece on that coming up next week, and there will be a couple print pieces coming up next week that I'm pretty proud of. That we're pushing some more cultural coverage like that. Erica Blunt has a piece coming up about this guy who uses stand-up comedy to teach some of the troublesome to their teachers, class clown kids at Douglas. And then Kenny Breckenridge has this piece that I'm working on editing right now that I'm really, really excited about speaking of family lineages and stuff. Henrietta Lax's great granddaughter working in the BTI, which is a system is an organization that trains people to work in the biomedical industries over off Pratt Street. And so it's going to be really, we're going to get some video to go with it, and it'll be both of these are multimedia things with both video and print. And so those will be things that are coming up next week. But while we're talking about family lineages, let's go to Paul Coates now.
Folks, this is Mark Steiner right here on the Mark Steiner Show on the Real News Network. And we continue our conversation with Paul Coates, who is founder of Black Classic Press. And this is their 40th anniversary. It's a huge piece of what they brought to us in the world, what they've retrieved, and also how they built this business, which we're going to explore as well during this segment with Paul Coates, who, as you said earlier, back in the late 60s, early 70s, after Vietnam, was defense captain for the Black Panther Party in Baltimore and built an entire world for all of us to wrap our hands around since then. And Paul, picking up. So, yeah. So, I mean, so how many titles do you think you've unearthed in Black Classic Press?
I don't know about unearthed, Mark. Probably unearthed, really, really unearthed, probably very few, okay? Because as I was saying earlier, most of the books that I became aware of and that I ended up republishing, they were brought to me, or I was told about those books by people in jail, or I found them by going through bibliographies. So these books were known. It wasn't so much that I unearthed them, so much that I extended the life of those books. That's what I prefer to think about it as, as opposed to being a discoverer. I extended the life of them. Now, if we look at it like that, extending the life of them, we probably have a constant number, probably about 125 titles on our list, which I would consider to be a very, very small list. Mark, I want, before I give my last breath, I really have a goal of publishing at least 2,000 titles. I don't seem to get there because I get distracted on other things and other reasons, but there's a vast wealth of information available that, in my eyes, should be reprinted. It doesn't mean that it will be commercially successful if people reprint it.
But that was never your intent with Black Classic Press.
It's not my intent, and still is not my intent. It still is not my intent. Our publishing lives because in 22 years ago, we founded a printing company, which was the other part of the vision of George Jackson.
That's BCP Digital.
That's BCP Digital Printing, yes. So that was actually the third part of that vision. Now, when we were having the vision, I had no money, no idea how this was going to happen. So when it happened, Mark, it wasn't like it was all planned out in finance. When it happened, one day it occurred to me, I said, oh, that's why we have the printing company. And the printing company showed up, because in the early 70s, when we were thinking about a printing company, a company that printed books, you needed millions and millions of dollars.
Gigantic machines.
Gigantic machines. Whew, Mark, But by the time of 1996, when we got to 1996, equipment had shrunk down. And so literally being able to print books was a matter of really tapping into the resources that you needed. And you could put a machine almost anywhere at that point, and you could begin to print books, and that's what we did.
But you started a business.
Yes.
That supported Black Classic Press.
Mark, it was a movement. It was a movement, and that's what. No, let me correct that, Mark. What you're saying is correct. I started a business, and I didn't understand it. I thought it was a movement, and it took me, honestly, Mark, it took me 15 years to understand that we were in business.
Right.
And so we made all the.
Well, you did pretty well for not knowing what you were doing.
No, Mark, we did a tremendous amount of bad, like not paying taxes and all the rest of that would continue to haunt me for 25 years, Mark. Because we thought we were a community program, and I had no commitment whatsoever, none, to pay taxes. Let me just tell you something, Mark. I know you know this already. Pay your taxes.
Yeah, really.
I don't care whether you think you're a movement.
Same thing I tell my children. Pay your taxes.
I don't care whether you think you're a movement, whether you think you're a business. Go on, just pay the taxes, man, and get it done with. Because I didn't understand that, Mark. But go back to your point. So I started a business. Yeah, okay.
But despite your starting a movement, that was acting like a business.
Yeah, movement slash.
You did build a business that became a serious business, printing for major corporations.
That's correct.
You know, I mean, doing and bringing and became a family business.
That's
your children came into, hiring people in the community to work in that business. Black folks who wouldn't have the jobs otherwise. I mean, that's significant.
So it is, Mark, and I should make a distinction. You know, the Black Classic Press part, because we have Black Classic Press and then BCP Digital Printing. And I was telling you, Black Classic Press exists because of BCP Digital Printing. So that part, like we actually, even though it's one business, we look at them as two businesses. So the folks who operate Black Classic Press are generally, and never have been my family, except for when I was married and my then wife, Cheryl, was a part of the business. So even today, that business exists as a mission. It still does. And as a mission, the people who operate that business will probably be the ones that business transitions to after I leave, after I leave the company and what have you. We're working on that now. The printing part of the business is a business. And so there are members of my family there that work in it. I think it's important to make that as a distinction. I mean, because, you know, what I've come to understand, Mark, it's not good that it's okay. And it's kind of important if we do good in our lifetime. But Mark, you know, our job on the planet should be trying to ensure that good is done after we leave.
Right.
You know, that's why we raise our children, right? You know, and if we create an institution, to look for that institution to survive in our lifetime is short-sighted if we don't look for it to survive beyond us. And in that sense, Black Classic Press, we're already working on how the publishing part, that mission part, survives beyond us. And it won't necessarily be with the printing part as a part of it.
Separate, you mean?
That's the way we're looking at it now.
Interesting.
Yes, that's the way we're looking at it now. So there already is a designated successor for that.
A couple of things, though. I mean, one of the things you did with your business, which I think is important to talk about before we come back to Black Classic Press and the celebration coming up this month in Baltimore for Black Classic Press, is that you have a business that employs people. You're a small businessman, but you wanted and encouraged a union in your own business. And I think it's really important to talk about this for a minute, because that is you living by your principles, what you believe is right in terms of society and people's and working class people in this country. I mean, to do that, I think, is almost an anomaly for most small businesses.
Yeah, my work experience, what little work I did before starting a movement/business, and before being captured by the Panthers, that work was done as a union member, and I've always been aware of union history and admired union history from the sense of it seeming reasonable to establish a basis of cooperative work. You know, it's a beginning point for cooperative work. And so when we set up the printing company, almost immediately, I looked for how that could be done. I looked for a model of how that could be done. And I was encouraged in this city by people like Bob Moore, 1199E, Fred Mason, the AFL-CIO, he was with 1199E.
Right.
And they were able to help support us and steer us toward the union communication workers of America that we're a part of at this point. They were able to guide me along that path. I should say, mentioning Fred Mason's name, that Fred was one of those 6 people. He was an ex. I don't even know what he was, an ex or whatever he was, but he's always had labor at his heart. He's always had labor at his heart. He's always had working class people at his heart, and that's what he worked in for the rest of his life and continues to work in.
But to me, that's also what you're building as a movement with Black Classic Press and bringing to a larger world works that people didn't know existed. Most people did not know existed. That explain who we are as human beings, what black folks really did, what black folks wrote about, what Africa was about from the 19th and 18th century. I mean, this is really important stuff. You marry that with building a business where you as a small business person allow a union to be part of the founding of everything. I mean, that's, I think, a model that people need to really wrestle with. Because it comes to me, it comes out of your being a working class kid. It comes out of your being, for want of a better term at the moment, an African revolutionary thinker. Your experience in Vietnam. All that coming together to create something that is really unique. You don't, I mean, this story is a really unique story, I think.
Thank you, Mark. Living it, I don't feel it all that. No, but it's been here's what I feel. I feel that everything, and I'm glad to have the opportunity to get this in, right? Because I think it all comes down to this. I feel that everything I've been a part of and everything I've ever been able to accomplish has been done because I was supported to do it. Okay? I was supported to do it. I was guided to do it. In cooperation, I was allowed to do it. You know, I think about Black Classic Press, and you know, I'm married. I have a total of 7 biological children, and at one point, I married the mother of the writer who became Ta-Nehisi Coates. Okay, I married her. Well, my existence as a father, my existence at Black Classic Press, all that is made possible because she was able to support me, you see? Because she was able to support me. The children that I had before her, it was because the mothers and fathers of the mothers supported me. Those people knew me in the Panther Party. And when I went to set up Black Classic Press, when I went to set up the George Jackson prison movement, they were some of my strongest supporters. You know, they didn't run me to court because I didn't have child support. They didn't run me to court. What they did was give me their support and say that they were going to take care of the children.
But what's important is here, let me point something out here as you're saying this, because people can misconstrue things before we come back to Black Classic Press. You may not have been in this classic term of writing a check for child support, but one of the things that Paul Coates did was stayed in his children's lives until they, to reach until man and womanhood.
Of course.
You were there all the time for those children.
Of course. And that is important too, Mark.
Because we think of in this world, everything has, if you're not paying a check for $500 a month and you're not being a father, I mean, that's not what you were saying.
And of course, I work to do support.
Yeah,
I guess what impresses on me is there were times I knew I didn't have money. And I knew that those grandparents gave me value anyway, you know, because they appreciated me in the community and they encouraged me to be in the community doing what I was doing. They saw value in what I was doing and they saw value in my relationship. I always, anyone that ever knew me, and you'll see pictures of me all the time, my children are always with me.
Right.
Always with me, always with me. And so it was important to build family. It was important to engage with community. It was important to have the help of those grandparents, those parents. And I'm Mark, so we're doing that celebration of 40 years. Get this, that celebration is actually a celebration of gratitude. It's an opportunity to be thankful for all of the people who showed up. You know, like you have a vision, you want to do something, and that's all you need, and going out the door, and that's all you got. But people show up to help you. And that's what 40 years have been for me. I don't care. Other people may say, well, black folks don't do this, white folks don't do that. I've been helped all the way. I've had a great 40-year run, you know, a great 40-year run because people have helped me every step of the way, Mark.
So we skimmed across a name here I want to come back to. Walter Mosley. Mm-hmm. You've had a relationship as a friend for a long time.
Yes.
One of America's great writers,
yes,
thinkers, who I've enjoyed interviewing over the years.
Yes.
But you publish a certain amount of books that he writes, right?
No, well, we've published a couple of books. We've published a couple of books with Walter. Walter and I had this, Laura Lippman wrote an article in The Sun about Walter and I, and talks about us being, because Walter described us as being two coyotes who go down the road together, and if we see something we want, we say, we'll go over and do this. Let's go over there and get that. And then other times we say, you go over and get that. You know? So it's no way that I could afford to support Walter as the writer he is, a world-class writer. He has the opportunity to make, at times, millions of dollars with his writing, and he should do that. And we agreed very, very early on. And at the same time, there would be works at times that he would not want to take through a major publisher or that didn't fit a major publisher. And those works would be available through Black Classic Press. And we serve together in that capacity. We're also, which will be announced at the 40th, we're also, any of his works that go out of print, they come to Black Classic Press. So that's a part of our mission anyway. And we have that kind of relationship.
So this 40th anniversary, just let me talk about that before we come back, Black Classic Press, and conclude. It's almost a weekend-long celebration you're having, right?
It is. We're like a Friday, Saturday, and a Sunday. Yeah, we're going to do an open house on Sunday. We're going to bring people in, have them make books in free labor. They will not have to be union workers.
Do not expect to be paid if you come on Sunday.
They're not getting paid. But we want to be able to have people go through some hands-on demonstrations about how books are made. And to have that kind of resource available in the Black community is a tremendous thing that most folks don't even think of. You got a manufacturing company that you can walk into and make these books. So we're going to do that. Saturday, we're going to do a book fair, and we're going to have panel sessions during the day, and that evening we'll have this gala in which people are coming in from all over. We have a number of authors coming in and people who also will thank us, and we're going to thank them. And then on Friday, we're doing a welcome reception, which is going to welcome people into Baltimore and thank them again for helping support us. And out of all this, look, so we're going to do all that. We're going to have all that fun, and we're going to raise membership for the Reginald F. Lewis Museum. That's one of the goals and one of the outcomes of this. Mm-hmm. We want to raise membership, and we want to raise money for the museum. It's no point in being grateful if you can't give some of that gratitude back to people. And that's what we're going to do, Mark.
So I think it's important to say Black Classic Press, after 40 years, on the things you've published and put out, really is born of your social, political, community philosophy about who we should be as human beings. It's also born of, for want of a better term, your Africanness, your understanding of what it means to be descended from Africa, and what that means in terms of community and what you owe back, and what's been and your relationship with other people. I mean, that complexity is in there. I think it's really important for people to understand that.
Yeah, Mark. Yes. Let me just say yes to that, because you said it better than I could say it. Yeah, it's got all of that. It's got all that stuff up in it, man. All of that works.
So, any little things you're going to lay out here about what's going to happen, what's coming out next? You have new books you're about to give us?
We have new books, but you know, Mark, we're working on a number of books, and new for me is old. Okay,
right,
a lot of times
right,
it's old.
Right.
You know? But we do have some new books also. One of the things we started a few years ago through declaration, and that is declaring what we want to be. We started publishing books in the sphere of Black studies, and so our goal is to be a press that is the dominant press in providing books on the Black experience, the Black Studies program. So we've got a couple of books coming through there, some on some local activists out of DC. We have some books that are coming on hip hop and some other things. So we're actually looking ahead, and at the same time, Mark, I'm going to do this here with you, okay? I don't know how much time we got, but I'm going to do it, okay? Look, so I started by telling you that we started as a prison program. I told you that we started by getting books into the jail and how that didn't work because people use it as a commodity. So I'm going to tell you here, we've set up a new press in the very early stages, and it's called New Mission Press. New Mission Press actually, and it won't be under my leadership, it'll be under someone's leadership who worked with me. New Mission Press, what we're going to do is publish books specifically for the jails, specifically for the jails. And those books will be published at a discount, at a discounted rate. Some people still won't have the money to buy them, but they'll be able to exchange them in the jail. So that's okay too, because that's what those books are going to be for. And we expect that we're going to be able to grab a world experience. It'll start with Black books, but we have the capacity to do Latino books. We have the capacity to do general American history books. We're going to have a major effort, Mark, it'll be rolled out shortly, but expanded over the next few years. That's what's really ahead for the press. So we're not going back to the old mission. It's actually a new mission.
21st century.
And it still is about using the power, the brain power that's in those jails incarcerated and held. The white brain power, the Black brain power. It's going to be about educating people.
Brother Paul Coates, it's a pleasure to have you here in the studio with us. Thank you so much. Congratulations on all this, man. The 40th anniversary. Well deserved, all these accolades and more.
Thank you.
We've been sitting here with Paul Coates and Black Classic Press. What's the email? What's the website?
The website is blackclassicbooks.com. Blackclassicbooks.com.
Make sure you go there. I've been here with Paul Coates. I'm Mark Steiner for the Real News Network. Thank you so much. Talk to you all next week.
I mean, we should give yesterday was Mark Steiner's birthday.
Yeah, happy birthday, Mark.
It's also nice to have Mark here at The Real News.
Yeah, it's really great to get to work with him.
The quality of conversations is, it's rare that you get these sort of great long-form conversations where people are really dealing with serious things, but there's some humor and there's some...
Totally. Yeah, sometimes I feel like interviews between two friends are hard to watch or listen to because it's like you're eavesdropping on a conversation. But like Mark and Paul Coates have this they've been friends for decades, but they have this just like really amazing chemistry and are very like on the same page and seem so comfortable talking about a whole broad range of topics.
Also, I don't know what's wrong with you. Eavesdropping's my favorite thing in the world.
Yeah, I feel like you gotta be nosy to be a journalist. Like, I'm kind of like owning my nosiness now. Like,
oh, what's that you say?
Like, what? Wait, who? But why? But
no, but this conversation is really interesting because last week they talk about what the meaning of Black classic press is and how Black folks have classics too. Like, it's not just white people who get to control what like the literary canon is. Black folks have classics too. And then this week they get into like what it means to be working in Black classic press. So they talk about the unionized staff and they talk about what like the labor that goes into the press is like. I really love this series. It's great.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. So I did a piece on rap beef, which is I got some pretty positive responses. Thanks for that, for all of you who have seen it already. But this piece just talks about I kind of started at the beginning of early rap beef, how rap beef kind of started and brought it to today where, sometimes it can turn out a little more violent, especially now, like we were talking about earlier. Right now, Baltimore has 109 murders. And we've seen a few rappers or people affiliated with rappers that, got caught up or got murdered. You see, like, the narrative automatically go to the rap beef, or, and sometimes it's more than that. Sometimes there are other factors, and so I just wanted to kind of pose the question, to pay a little closer attention and talk more about. I talked a bit about some of the rap beefs that have not escalated to violence, and the possibility of that. So that was a pitch and the idea that you gave me, actually, Baynard. Thanks.
I mean, it's a great piece. I thought it was important that we needed to talk about, because it usually happens that people start throwing it around as if, oh, this is this. And it's way more complicated than that. And like, I've been following the saga of Young Moose and Daniel Herschel for years, and Herschel's now, but he's one of the people who, on the breaking news sort of story that came out as we were starting this podcast, he's now been convicted and is going to be sentenced soon unless they grant him a new trial. But Moose would have lines about Herschel in his songs, and that made Herschel mad, and so that was in a way a rap beef.
Actual rap beef with diss tracks
with the police. Yeah. I've been trying to wreck my brain to find another situation where a rapper had been totally, so obviously and blatantly targeted by police. I feel like not since Tupac have we heard about it. That's not to say it doesn't happen. And I thought it was good to do this piece and kind of pose that question, you know what I mean, to look a little deeper into some of these.
So, I mean, and we did have a couple of sort of like Moose. Gucci Mane was in prison for a while and seemed to have one cop who was sort of targeting him with that, and then also Meek Mill seemed to have
Meek Mill definitely
a particular cop that was after him. I don't even know what network it was, but there was actually, I usually don't like the network sort of news things, but there was a pretty good like hour-long thing about Meek Mill and Larry Krasner is why and how he's going to start trying to work with Krasner to do criminal justice reform in Philadelphia now.
Yeah, it was because of Krasner that he got out, right? So it's
So but it's this one has its particular Baltimore flavor, and this is a really great piece. And there's that trial coming up. I think maybe next week.
Next week I mentioned it in there. One of Young Moose's affiliates is being charged with murdering a rapper named Nasty, who had beef with Moose. So that trial's coming up next week. I do want to say one thing about this piece, and one thing that I thought, one of the reasons why I thought it was important is because I think that a lot of times people who are not in the world of hip hop or understand black culture and stuff like that oftentimes take rappers not seriously, and I think that, it's important to highlight the fact that there are a lot of rappers who are extremely intelligent, extremely influential in their neighborhoods. You take a Young Moose who's an entrepreneur, has his own store, does a lot of things in his neighborhood. You take, we're talking about Meek Mill and this opportunity he has now to reform criminal justice, the criminal justice system in Philadelphia. And, I'm always impressed with rappers who, you can see them doing so many other things, and I think that this is not the piece to do it on that it's going to do it, but I think that we can start to really look at the the fact that we can draw help and influence from all different parts of our communities. You know, there are people who do all kinds of things, you know, and like to trap somebody in one box as just a rapper and not take them seriously, I think is a little dangerous. So so hopefully look out for more pieces from me specifically on these different aspects of the hip-hop world, which is my world. What's up, y'all? I'm Easy Jackson for the Real News Network. Today, we're going to talk about rap beef. What is rap beef? Hip-hop music for rappers is often a blood sport. Most times, if you listen to your favorite lyricist or MC, no matter how positive they might appear, they'll always resort to their primitive form of braggadocio, sneak disses, and gun-toting promises of the most lethal confrontation.
If I kill a nigga, it won't be the alcohol. Ay, I'm the realest nigga after all. Bitch, be humble. Bitch, sit down. Be humble. Sit down.
So it shouldn't be a surprise that in a city like Baltimore, if a murder victim happens to be a rapper or is involved with rap music in some way, the murder is often assumed to be the result of what is called rap beef. But beef has been a part of rap for ages.
Whatever they want. They're getting treated better than me and you.
Look at that. And it wasn't always violent. Hip-hop as a culture was founded originally as an alternative to gang violence. Rival crews would compete with each other in the form of breakdancing, DJing, and of course MCing. One of the earliest rap beefs involved the iconic female MC Roxanne Shante, who in 1984 sold 250,000 copies of Roxanne's Revenge.
He ain't really cute and he ain't great. He don't even know how to operate. He came up to me with some bull rap. But let me tell you something, don't you know it was whack? So when he came up to me, I told him to step back. He said, you call yourself an MC? I said, this is true. He said, explain to me really what MCs must do. I said, listen very close, cause I don't say this every day. My name is Roxanne, and they call me Shante.
The song was in response to the group UTFO's song, Roxanne, Roxanne, which was about a fictional girl who wasn't responding to phone calls.
They go that girl they call Roxanne. She's all stuck up. Why you say that? Cause you wouldn't give a guy like me no rap. Man, she was walking down the street, so I said, hello, I'm Kango from UTFO. And she so, I said, so, baby, don't you know I can sing rap dance in just one show? Cause I'm Kango, Mr. Sophisticator. As far as I know, ain't nobody greater. From beginning to end and to beginning, I never lose because I'm all about winning.
At the time, Roxanne Shante was only 14 years old. Her song made UTFO find several different girls to play the real Roxanne. And the back and forth went on with anywhere from 30 to 100 songs being recorded. But even then, the beef stayed on wax. Some say violence and rap beef began with the historic beef of Tupac and Biggie in 1994. Their beef would ignite a whole East Coast versus West Coast war of words and violent incidents involving entourage members and affiliates. While there are several different theories and suspicions around the deaths of both rappers, it's never been proven whether or not they were directly related to the ongoing battle the two had. A battle that went as far as Tupac claiming to have had sex with Biggie's wife.
First off, fuck your bitch in the clique you claim. West side, when we ride, come equipped with game. You claim to be a player, but I fucked your wife.
Jay-Z and Nas had one of the most epic rap battles that successfully stayed on record. The two rap icons would go back and forth for nearly a decade with subliminal disses that escalated into some of the biggest records to date. Nas's Ether and Jay-Z's The Takeover still bring up debates about who ultimately won the battle. None of that matters today, as the two have squashed their beef and collaborated on several records since 2006's Black Republicans.
Black Republican money I got coming in. Can't turn my back on the hood, I got love for them. Can't clean my act for good, too much thugging them. Probably in the back of the hood, I'm like,
I feel like a black militant taking over the government. Can't turn my back on the hood, too much love for them. Can't clean my act for good, too much thugging them. Probably in the back of the hood, I'm like, fuck it then.
Most recently in Baltimore, a rap group on the rise, Peso the Mafia, were robbed of their gold chains. Their adversaries boasted of the robbery by posting an Instagram video of them holding the chains. Rap beef can get messy, violent, and downright scary. Peso the Mafia canceled their show days later, likely to ensure their own safety. In a city like Baltimore, rappers who boast of street life, drug dealing, and gun toting are often tested by those who actually live the street life that rappers promote. But is it always because of rap? Or are there other factors? Is rap beef an easy out by law enforcement in solving the murders of young black men who happen to rap? In May of 2017, Antonio Melvin was charged with the murder of Baltimore rapper Nasty, who had exchanged songs against rapper Young Moose. Melvin is said to be an associate of Young Moose's. That case is still pending. Young Moose had also been victim of harassment by then Detective Daniel Herschel, who was convicted in February on federal charges of racketeering. Moose mentioned Herschel in several songs. They could almost be considered diss tracks, and Herschel responded to them with violence. That's a real rap beef. When one of Baltimore's fastest rising stars, Lil Scooter, was murdered in 2016, Instagram street sleuths immediately cast blame on the rapper Shy Money, who it later seemed had nothing to do with it. But the loose rumors could have made a bad situation much worse. The last 2 months have seen another increase in violence and murder as the warm weather sets in. It's likely we'll hear of another homicide this summer tied by police to rap beef. But be sure to ask yourself, is it? And if you rap, let's try and keep the beef on wax.
So that's the show for this week. And speaking of shows this week, you have a show tomorrow night at MAP that's part of the Monument.
Yeah, Monument 101.
Which is really interesting because it came up as it's memorializing McKeldin Fountain, which no longer exists and was replaced with a swampy little postage stamp of dirt. And so there's been this sort of movement to how do we address the past that's no longer around, and there's this Monument series. What time is that show?
The show is from 5 to 8. DJ Double 8 and I will be doing the music for the entire time. We're gonna go back and forth between some shared sets and some solo sets. I'm excited about the Monument thing. It's kind of cool. They had me come in. It's an app that you can go to the site and in different places it'll show you what used to be there, and you also can hear like some storytelling and testimony from people who had been at the fountain over the years, and I got a chance to do that part of it, and it was really interesting for me because growing up in Baltimore, I realized in that interview that there were these several different stages of my life that I had spent at McKeldin Square, starting off being young, being a kid, and going down to the harbor and jumping in the water, which at one point they ended up outlawing, but a lot of kids like from Murphy Homes and neighborhoods nearby, we would go down the harbor and on hot days jump in the fountain and play in the fountain, and then they kind of criminalized us for doing that after a while, and then as I got older and I got into activism and community organizing, I had organized some rallies and stuff down there, and so it was really interesting to go through that process just for myself, and I think this piece, the Monument, them memorializing it helps to not take for granted the space that was there when we talk about redevelopment and things like that, people coming in and kind of rearranging the spaces, and a lot of times we forget what used to be there as time goes on and people move, so I'm excited about it. It's an all-day event. It starts at 1 down at the fountain, and then up to MAP in the evening for music and celebration stuff.
Yeah, I'm going to be at that as well. We've been lamenting that without a city paper or a beat right now that
there's nowhere to go to see what cool things are happening in Baltimore.
Yeah, so what are you doing this weekend, Dharna? You have anything cool going on?
I can't invite everyone to the podcast to a party at my brother's house.
You are going in a minute to the trash incinerator.
Yeah, that's what I'm about to leave out of here and do. I'm like so excited to go and look at the Bresco incinerator, which is probably like the dorkiest thing that I could possibly say. But yeah, I've been trying to do this for weeks. Shout out to Nicole Fabricant and her class for letting me come tour trash places with them. It's really dope.
Yeah, that's gonna be, I can't wait for the story. It's gonna be really cool. And you're going out with Taylor Hebden to shoot?
Yeah, Taylor Hebden's gonna come shoot. It's gonna be very cool.
And she also shot
she shot with me last night. Shout out to Taylor.
A lot of people do a lot of things that you don't see here at the Real News, and so like we want to thank them. And so Taylor on shooting those. We have Stephen Frank doing our engineering. We are audio produced by David Hebden and video produced by Dwayne Gladden.
Yeah, thanks so much, David and Dwayne.
So all of that makes this happen. Steve and Janice, I believe, filmed the Mothers of the Movement piece with Taya, and our intern, Serafina Harper, was there as well, assisting with those interviews. So shout out to all of y'all. I'm going to go this weekend. If you hear this before Saturday night, you should maybe go check out the Acme Corporation's Follow No Strangers to the Fun Places. It's written by Lola Pearson, who I think is one of the smartest writers in town.
Shout out to Lola.
Yeah,
Baltimore School for the Arts.
I reviewed her plays a couple times, and I liked her so much. I approached her and said, "Hey, let's write a TV show together." And we failed at doing it, but we tried. So that's my full disclosure in giving this plug. But it was because I said, like, I want to work with you because I think you're really a brilliant writer. So
there is something going on this weekend. If you want to look at some art about offshore wind, that's probably what I'll be doing on Sunday, which is their closing reception. It's called Wonders of the Wind. It's on St. Paul. I'm probably going to go get drunk and look at art about the need for a transition away from the fossil fuel economy. So you could come do that.
Oh, and one other cool little news thing that happened. If you're going to Ocean City this week, you will be able to see performers on the boardwalk. There was a Supreme Court case that the Maryland Volunteer Lawyers for the Arts won yesterday on behalf of boardwalk performers, that it is a First Amendment right to be able to perform, and that the corporate goons can't keep you out of it. So for doing that. So that's a nice little victory. And we forgot to send our producer, David Hebden, the lineup for the show, and he just texted me about that. So we're going to peace out and send him that so he can put it together.
Yeah.
And we will be talking with you next week.
What should we listen to on the way out? Can we listen to some Young Moose?
Let's definitely listen to some Young Moose.
All right.
Young Moose, nigga. Out the mud, nigga. Rest in peace to all our fallen soldiers, man. It ain't no sunshine around my motherfucking way. I know you heard that they killed Freddie Gray the other day. That's why they got us out here purging like some fucking slaves. But they don't care cause they racist and they getting paid. And they ain't where you from, dumbass, it's how you raised. Put a bullet in your head, I change your fate. They killing niggas now, another brother in the grave. And they ain't doing nothing about it, but they quit the rage. They try to throw us in the cage, ain't no letting us out. I wanna know why the mad keep on ducking us.